Net to Net podcast. I'm your host, Sam Kelty, and today we are talking about college football. We are about 2 weeks away from college football starting on August 31st, when a lot of teams kick off on the first Saturday. We're looking forward to it. I'm excited. But stuff that has been released this week or last week, towards the end of last week, is the AP poll preseason top 25 rankings. We are back. I'm so excited to dive into this. I know with football season coming around for NFL and college, with the NFL, I'm kind of waiting on preseason to finish up because it's hard to evaluate teams since you're seeing a lot of backups and stuff. So right now we're just going to focus on the college football aspect. And today we're going to react to the rankings that came out. So the first team in first place is ranked is Georgia. We talk about a team that you could say had a lot of players leave, players go to the draft, departing, but kind of were able to kind of re-keep their core. If you look at it, Kirby Smart still at the helm. Have kind of like a good team coming up. Carson Beck is still at the helm at quarterback. They did bring in transfers like Trevor Etienne. They did able to keep Cedric Van Pran, who didn't go to the draft. And then on the defensive side, kind of retooling the defense. They did lose, yes, both running backs, Kendall Milton and DeJuan Edwards. They lost Ladley McConkey. They lost Dominic Lovett. And then Brock Bowers, obviously, and then Cam Lannister and Javon Butler on the defensive side. Still looking to reclaim that are the number one team in the country. For them being number one, I know it's Georgia. They're powerhouse. I think with some other teams like Ohio State and Oregon, who I'll mention in a little bit, kind of upgraded their team a lot better. Yes, Georgia has a lot of those veterans that have been with the team for 3+ years or since their freshman year. So you look at the likes of Small Molden. They did lose Amarius Mims to the draft. They lost, who else? Brock Bowers, obviously, is a big one. But they did bring in players like KJ Bolden. They brought in Elias Robinson. Brought in London Humphreys. Hopefully he can replace that production that Ladley McConkey brought. The biggest thing is how they're going to replicate the production that Brock Bowers had. Unfortunately, you probably can't with the personnel they have. I think Georgia, just because they've been so good over the last few years, is probably why they're number one. Honestly, in my opinion, I'm at the beginning of the year, I had after the season ended, I did my real early top 10, and I did put Georgia at 1. But just based off of how the offseason went, I'm not seeing them as a number one team, but I put them as the number one team at that time I made the projections. So I do agree. I will say I did get that right because it is Georgia. They are a powerhouse. Going to the number 2 team is Ohio State. In my opinion, Ohio State might be the number one team. And it's shocking because as a big Oregon fan, I would say I would love to put Oregon over Ohio State, and we'll see who the best team is between Oregon and Ohio State on October 12th at Astune Stadium when Oregon faces off Ohio State, and I believe that's probably the biggest game of the year. 2 powerhouses that dominated in the transfer portal. But speaking on Ohio State right now, the players that they brought in: Caleb Downs, Quinshawn Judkins, Will Howard. starting quarterback caliber right there from Kansas, who had a phenomenal year last year. He completed 61 of his attempts. He threw for over 2,000 yards, 24 touchdowns. His interceptions were a little high. With 10, he ended up scoring 9 touchdowns on the ground too. So he is more versatile. I would say he's a better fit than Kyle McCord because he can actually extend the play with his legs. He can run the ball. He's very accurate. So something that I think they missed when they didn't before Kyle McCord. So the CJ Strouds and the Justin Fields of the world. But then you get Quinshon Judkins out of Ole Miss as a transfer, and now you pair him up with TreVeyon Henderson, who is one of the best running backs in the country, and you put him with Judkins with him. They do have the best running back, complementary to each other, the best tandem 1-2 punch that we've seen in a while. And Ohio State, they did really well. They go out and get a defensive stud out of Alabama and Caleb Downs, the younger brother of Josh Downs, who's in the NFL with the Colts. Caleb Downs is a beast. He's a freak of nature. He reminds me of a younger Brian Dawkins. He can hit, and he's a ball hawk. I do like what they did in the recruiting class. They go out and get Jeremiah Smith, who was the number 1 recruit in the country. He was the number 1 wide receiver recruit in the country. They go out and get Aaron Nolan. They also somehow bring in Julian Sayin from Alabama, who was a top prospect. They're stacked for the next few years. They have Aaron Nolans. They have Will Howard. Like I mentioned, TreVeyon Henderson, Chudquist, able to keep Emeka Mbuka due to NIL. They were able to retain a lot of their players that, like JT Tuimalu, Jack Sawyer, Denzel Burke, just to name a few that stayed. Cody Simons is still there. Latham Ransom is now that 1-2 punch with Caleb Downs. It is a great team all the way through. My only thing is the linebackers. You do lose a Steel Chambers. You do lose Tommy Eichenberg. Can Cody Simons, Sony Styles, JJ Hicks, Gabe Powers, Avrius Reese, can they step up? Can they be what a traditional Ohio State linebackers, physical, get downhill quick, stop the run, play zone coverage, and is athletic. We've seen that in the past. I think this is going to be a linebacker by committee. Caleb Downs has played certain times as a sub linebacker at Alabama. You might look to see him do that sometimes. There's a chance Latham Ransom can do it too. So this team is all the way around. I would honestly, now looking at how their offseason went, would put them ahead of Bama. Or sorry, not Bama, Georgia as the number 1 team. But that's just my opinion. Going to the number 3 team, Oregon, you talk about a team that's another team that's dominated the transfer portal. You go out and bring in Dylan Gabriel, Dante Moore as your quarterbacks for now and the future. You go out, you still have Noah Whittingham, who was injured most last season, and Jordan James, who had a breakout season, even with Bucky Irving being there. You go out and lose a Troy Franklin, who was your best receiver last year, and replace him with an Evan Stewart, who was a 5-star recruit, number 1 player in the country when he was coming out of college. He's an unbelievable player. He's big. He's about 6'1", 6'1", 757 pounds. Throw the ball up there. He's going to get it. He can go. He's a big jump ball guy. And then you have speed on the outside with Tez Johnson and Trace Holden. Yeah, Gary Bryant still who's there. Dylan Gabriel threw for an absurd amount of touchdowns last year. I believe he threw for over 3,660 yards. He threw for 30 touchdowns. He only turned the ball over 9 times, and he also ran for 12 touchdowns. So put that together, he combined 42 touchdowns last season. He is the favorite for the Heisman coming into the preseason. He would be my favorite because if you look at some of the quarterbacks other than Carson Beck, Jalen Milrose struggled. Quinn Ewers struggled to be healthy. I mentioned Milrose. He struggled with that inconsistency. Drew Aller, inconsistency again. Michigan, they have really no quarterback that's proven. So you can make those arguments for why Dylan Gabriel is probably the favorite right now going into the year. Once I mentioned, yeah. And then on the defensive side, yes, you lose a Brandon Dollars, but when you're able to keep a Jordan Burch and go out and recruit Elijah Rushing, you go out and replace him. You were able to, Jeffrey Bassa stays for another year. Now, my thing is on the backside. Yes, we did. Yes, they did bring in Jabbar Muhammad, who is a shutdown corner, one of the best corners in the country last year we saw out of Washington. He comes in and replaces the late Kyrie Jackson. Rest in peace. I wish I had big things for him, and just it was a sad thing that he ended up passing. But yeah, I'll kind of talk about that more in my NFL podcast, and I'll go more in detail on that. But yeah, you bring in a Cam Alexander, you have Dante Manning still, and then like I said, you bring in Jabbar Muhammad, you bring in Kobe Savage on the backside. They have a really good team. Oregon's always had that one game that they play down to their level and end up losing. So hopefully now you're more in a tougher division, or not division, but conference with some big boys. They're going to always play to their standard. Oregon has, I think, probably one of the best, not if the best, offensive line. They went out and got Matthew Bedford in the transfer portal. They still have Anjay Cornelius. They have Josh Cornley Jr. They still have George Silva. They have a great and very good and very experienced offensive line that can protect Dylan Gabriel, that we saw Bo Nix barely getting sacked last year, and they kept that offensive line together. I believe they lost one. If I'm not mistaken, they just lost Jackson Powers, Stephen Jones, so 2 of the 5 offensive lines. So they still have 3 remaining, which is great. Yes, you lost Evan Williams. Yes, you lost Kyrie Jackson. Yes, you lost Troy Frontline, but they were able to just reload in the transfer portal, reload in recruiting. Right now, they're still doing great in the recruiting for even 2025, but their schedule is very good. Look for October 12th to be the game of the year. Ohio State, Oregon. I think that's going to be the 2 best teams that did the best in the offseason to get there. Next is, in my opinion, the number 5 team. I had them at 5, but they came in at 4, is Alabama. I'm surprised they put them this high up with a new coach coming in Kalen Bohr. Yes, Kalen Bohr, we saw him do phenomenal things at Washington as the coach. But you're no Nick Saban. I'm sorry. Nick Saban is a different breed. And can you get the most out of Jalen Milrose? We saw flashes of great from him, and we saw flashes of when he got benched and they had to bring in a Ty Simpson or at the time Tyler Buckner. This team is going to have a revamped look, I would say. They really didn't do much in the transfer portal. They were able to retain starters like Malik Moore. They were able to retain Dante Lawson. They were able to get LT Overton in the transfer portal at left tackle. LT Overton. They were, believe, able to bring back the offensive tackle that left for Iowa. If I'm not mistaken, they were able to. He, for some reason, decided to come back. In Caden Proctor, he came back after leaving for Iowa, so they were able to kind of build that defense up. But they did lose a lot of people from the transfer portal because of Nick Saban leaving. That's a lot of people. Des Ricks, Isaiah Bond, Malik Benson, Trey Amos, Julian Sand, Tyler Buckner, Caleb Downs is the biggest one. So Kalen Bohr has a lot of work. I think they're kind of overrating Alabama just because they are Alabama. And other people will disagree and say it's still the Bama team. Kalen Bohr can fit right in with what Saban was doing. I don't know. It's going to be a long year for Bama, I think, if they can't get it right quickly, because they are. You bring in an Oklahoma and a Texas into the SEC, it's going to get tougher and tougher and tougher. So yeah, I had them at 5, and they came in at 4. The team that came in at 5 that I had at 4 is Texas. I think Texas did a great job this offseason replacing certain key players, and they were able to retain a lot of guys. Quinn Ewers stayed. C.J. Baxter stayed, but recently C.J. Baxter is out for the season with an ACL tear, so now they're going to rely heavily on Jadon Blue, Trey Wisner, Jared Gibson, and Chris Clark as kind of that running back committee. They go out and get an Isaiah Bond to replace Xavier Worthy from Alabama, still from competition. They were able to get Sly Bolton from Oregon State. They were able to get Matthew Golden from Houston. And then they go out and get a Trey Moore, who was a defensive wrecking ball last year at UTSA. He had 14 sacks. He had in total 45 tackles, 10 for loss. 30 solo tackles, and he had an unbelievable season. And I know Oregon was looking at him, Ohio State was trying to get him, but he commits to Texas, and I think Texas honestly could be pushing the top 3 of what they did. They bring in an Adrian McBuka from Clemson. They bring in who I mentioned earlier. And when you lose players like a Byron Murphy, a Trayvon Sweat, Xavier Worthy, you have to be able to reload. And I think Texas was able to do that, replacing Adonis Mitchell and Xavier Worthy with Isaiah Bolden, Sly Bolden, and Isaiah Bond, and Matthew Golden. I think that's tremendous what they can do out there. They also were able to go get Cody Colin Simons, a 5-star linebacker, able to bring in a 4-star defensive back in Kobe Black. Just the way Steve Sarkisian is running that program, I think they have no problem next year getting to the Big 12 championship and even pushing for a national championship. I don't think they're there yet. I don't think they're there as in the respects of Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon, but they are close. They are on the doorstep. They're knocking at the door. So yeah, coming in at 6, which I think was a little high, Penn State. Penn State comes in. Yes, they had a great year. Of course, they lose to the 2 teams that you already kind of know who they would always lose to, and the likes of Ohio State, Michigan. So can Drew Aller take that next step? I did mention earlier, Drew Aller, why he's not the favorite for the Heisman because of that inconsistency. And then they lost a lot of people on the offensive side. On the defensive side. Yes, they lose the best one of the best left tackles in the game in college football, Ole Fashoon, to the draft. Then they lose a lot of key starters on the defense side. Curtis Jacobs, Adisa Isaac, Chomp Robinson, Kalen King, Johnny Dixon. That is a lot of players to lose and not be able to regain a lot of those players to help you bring in. They're going to really rely heavily on the likes of Drew Aller, Julian Fleming. They were able to keep Nick Singleton. They bring in Julian Fleming. But on the defensive side, that's a lot of players. They're going to rely heavily on Abdul Carter to be that next Chomp Robinson. They're going to rely on Cam Miller to step up, and same with A.J. Harris and the likes of Kalen King leaving. Kalen King, about 2 years ago, was projected to go in the first round. One of the best corners, still one of the best corners, I think. Last year, he had a really down season. He struggled playing on the outside, and for that, he went undrafted. So, can those 2 step up? And the likes of bringing a Jalen Kimber, can they all step up and be the next great Nittany Lions cornerback? In my opinion, they're a little high. The team I had in my pick, who I'm going to kind of jump to at 6, in my opinion, Ole Miss. They have them coming in at 8, which is kind of odd because I really like what they were very active in the transfer portal, bringing in Deion Smith, bringing in Chris Paul Jr., bringing in Princely Amunamane, bringing in Antoine Wells, bringing in Walter Nolan. They went and Trey Amos. That defense is scary and it's loaded. And really, they lost a lot of just role players, and then losing probably Judkis was the biggest one, your starter and running back. But outside of that, I feel like Ole Miss is just going to be fine. They have Jackson Dart back. Like I mentioned, they bring on all these guys, and they did really well in recruiting. So I just think with Lane Kiffin, they have the opportunity to be better, and so I like where they're positioned at. And yeah, I think they should have been a little higher over Penn State, but I think just because it's Penn State, they kind of have them higher based off of last season. We think about it. Ole Miss won 11-2, 6-2 in the SEC. Penn State went, I believe, 10-3, 7-2 in the Big Ten. So Ole Miss can hold their own, and I think they're going to do really well this season again. Now, kind of jumping back, which I actually nailed on the head. They had Michigan at 7. I had Michigan at 7 because yes, they are the national champions. They should be in the top 10 start of the season. Now, is that where they're going to be the entire season? No. I just think there's too many variables and off the field issues that will hinder this team. They did lose a ton of players. They lost quite a few starters from both sides of the ball. When you lose a Blake Corum, when you lose a Blake Corum, a Junior Colson, a Mike Stransel, those leaders, those veterans on that team, you lose. Can the people that were playing behind them, like a DJ Walter, or a Keon Sabb, or Rod Moore, can they step up and be that person? Yes, you still have Mason Graham. Yes, you still have Will Johnson, who Will Johnson can arguably be one of the best corners in the country. But no J.J. McCarthy. Now you're relying on Alex Orji or Jalen Daigle to become that starting quarterback. Yes, you lose Blake Corum, but you still have Donovan Edwards. You lose Roman Wilson. Can Tyler Morris, can Frederick Moore, can Carmelo English step up? Can these guys step up? Because you lost 12 players to the draft. And not counting the ones that didn't get drafted. You lost J.J. McCarthy, who unfortunately tore his meniscus. And I'll talk about that when we get closer to the season about the NFL after preseason, kind of do that preview, and then regular season. But it looks like Sam Darnold's going to start. But going back to Michigan, you lose your head coach, Jim Harbaugh. You lose Jesse Mintner to San Diego or to Los Angeles. Now Sherman Moore is being investigated. Michigan's being investigated. That's a lot of outside source, not on top of everything that's going on with Michigan on the field too. So, yes, I like them at 7. I would have put them anywhere from 7 to 9, 7 to 10, 7 to 9. But will they be there come the end of the season? I don't know. They might be, but we'll keep chugging along through the top 10. But now we look at it at number at number 8, they have Ole Miss, which I already talked about. At number 9, which I hit on the head again, I put Notre Dame, and I think that's kind of a good spot. I like that they were able to bring in the likes of a Riley Leonard to replace a Sam Hartman. Riley Leonard just screams Notre Dame, which fits the bill. I like what they did. And yes, they lost a lot of their defensive players, but they were able to keep most of them, which is very good. So, see a lot of play from Rigor Morris. You see a lot of play from Jaden McMakin. You'll see a lot of players that just kind of fit Notre Dame's way of playing. They were able to bring in a Chris Mitchell, a Bo Collins, like I mentioned, Riley Leonard. And they did really well in recruiting. I think Marcus Freeman is building a great program over there that, yes, they're still playing in independent. Could we see them make that transition to a conference like the AC, back to the ACC or to the Big Ten or to the SEC? Who knows? But they bring in Bo Collins, they bring in Jaden Harris, bring in Jordan Clark, kind of fill those holes that they lost from the draft and players that graduated. Notre Dame kind of fits that. My real thing is the running back play. Who's going to replace Andre Estime? You have the likes of Ania Williams, Kendrick Young, Jeremiah Lovin, Jaden Price, G. Payne. There's a lot of players that can step up. Audrey Gasmay was a huge piece of that offense last year. Can they replicate that with the running backs they have? Or do you think they should have went out and got in the transfer portal? This season will be interesting. And then wrapping out number 10, which I'm shocked is at number 10, is LSU. I did not have them in the top 10. I had Missouri. I think Missouri, the pieces that LSU lost in the likes of Jaden Daniels, Brian Thomas Jr., and those boys that they lost, just I don't know if they can replicate what they had from last year. They were a very, very good team. And did Brian Kelly do enough in the transfer portal? I don't know. They have a tough schedule coming up. Like I mentioned, they lost a lot of players. They lost Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. Those players are very non-replaceable because they were so good. Can the team that's there do it now? I don't know. I think they were ranked a little high. Yes, you have Harold Perkins still. You still have Amari Jones Jr. You still have Will Campbell, a great offensive line. Few players on the offensive line. You still have, who I mentioned, Harold Perkins, a great outside rusher. He's probably a top 5, top 10 pick in the draft next year. Where you're really looking at is your quarterback play. And the quarterback, I don't know if you can get a lot. What are we going to see? Who's going to start? Is it going to be AJ Swanee? Is it going to be Garrett Newsomer? We're not going to know until the first game of the season who they're going to go with. So, can Brian Kelly whip up some magic? Maybe. But the team I like in front of him is Missouri. Missouri still has Luther Burton, still has Brian Cook. They have a good team, a great coach, in Elijah Drinkwitz. He was very good last year. They still have Cook. Yes, you lose Schroeder, but you're able to bring in like Carroll, Jones, Roberts. You still have all of those running backs that played very well. Marcus Carroll coming in out of Georgia State brings some physicality to the team that you can praise Schroeder with. Yes, you were able to. Luther Burton did not declare. Yes, you did lose 2 cornerbacks and it's Ross Straw and Chris Abrams Drain, 2 very good cornerbacks, and losing a physical linebacker in Tyron Hooper. They were able to go out and replace that with a Darius Smith, a Corey Flagg Jr. out of Miami and Georgia, respectively. People that one player that has played in the SEC before. You go out and get a physical running back in Nate Knoll out of Appalachian State. Can bring something to the table. They go out and still retain a lot of those key players that were in that team that played Ohio State in the bowl game and won. They had a great season. I think the way you look at it, they should be over LSU, in my opinion. And then kind of wrapping out the 12 through 15, you have Florida State, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Tennessee. I do like that. And then most of it, pretty much for the top 25, is pretty accurate, I would say. And then you have Kansas State, Utah, Miami, Oklahoma State, USC, Kentucky, Florida, Iowa, and Auburn. And then just outside Wisconsin, SMU, and Arizona. I like all those. Pretty much those kind of fit because they all had decent seasons. I'm shocked that Louisville is a little lower from what season they had. They had a tremendous season. They actually had a better season than Clemson, but Clemson's for some reason ranked higher than them, which kind of odd for me, just based off of their season. And then talking about my team, Cincinnati, they're at 62. Is understandable because of what happened this season. They first year under Coach Satterfield, they did change up the team a lot. Hopefully, look for a bounce back year with the UC Bearcats. That's always my hope as an alum, to see good things out of it. So hopefully we can see some growth. We can bring in Brandon Sorby. Hopefully Dante Corleone stays healthy. But yeah, that wraps up my college football episode today. Hopefully we'll be back with some soccer and then NFL coming up once preseason, and then I know me and Casey probably recap how the Olympics and preview to the NBA soon. But yeah, soccer. We'll definitely come out with an episode real quickly. We'll definitely try to release something before the season starts in the Premier League, and then I'll probably give you my takes on the other top 5 leagues with the boys. So follow us on social, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, and see you guys soon. Peace.